In a small town, not far from the busy streets of Lagos, lived a young woman named Claire. Life had not been easy for her. She was born into a humble home where her father, Papa Johnson, worked as a cleaner in the city, and her mother, before she passed away, sold petty goods by the roadside. Papa Johnson was a strong man, but sickness does not care about strength. It came upon him like a thief, slowly draining him until he could no longer work. The doctors said he needed an urgent operation, one that cost more money than Claire had ever seen in her life. While she struggled to gather money, a visitor arrived one evening. He was an old man, Chief Shehu, a man of great wealth and power. He was known across the land as a businessman whose riches seemed to have no end. But he was not a man who gave without reason. Chief Shehu did not waste time. He had come with a proposal. He would pay for Papa Johnson's surgery, but in return, Claire had to marry his grandson, Gerald Shehu. People in the town had heard of Gerald. He was a young man who had everything, money, power, and looks, but he had refused to marry. Chief Shehu, tired of his grandson's stubbornness, had decided to buy him a wife. Claire was troubled. Marriage was supposed to be out of love, not a contract. But what choice did she have? Her father was dying. If she refused, she would be left alone in the world, and there would be no hope for her family. She agreed. Weddings were supposed to be filled with laughter and dancing. People were supposed to gather and celebrate, sharing in the joy of two families coming together. But Claire's wedding was none of these things. It was quiet, rushed, and empty of happiness. There was no music, no feast, no guests, only a few government officials and the cold stare of Gerald Shehu. He arrived late, dressed in a fine suit, but there was no excitement in his eyes. He did not look at Claire, did not smile, did not say a word beyond what was necessary. Once the papers were signed, he handed her a bank card. There was no explanation, only the instruction that she could use it as she pleased. Then, without warning, he told her he had a business trip abroad and would be leaving immediately. There was no farewell, no warmth, no promise of return. Just like that, he was gone. Claire was left standing alone, in a marriage that did not feel real. She moved into the Shehu mansion, a house so grand and empty that it felt more like a graveyard than a home. But she did not know then. She was not the only one living there. The Shehu mansion was vast, with many rooms, long hallways, and heavy silence. At first, Claire tried to settle in, telling herself that it was only a house. But strange things started happening. At night, she would hear footsteps in the corridor, slow and deliberate. But when she opened the door, there was no one there. Other times, she would hear whispers, soft voices speaking words she could not understand. She tried to tell herself it was nothing, but the feeling never left her. She was being watched. One evening, she arranged the chairs in the living room and went to bed. By morning, all the chairs had been turned upside down. Another night, she locked the kitchen door before sleeping, only to wake up and find it wide open, with the gas burner turned on. Fear crept into her bones. The house was alive, and whatever was inside it did not want her there. Still, she stayed. She had nowhere else to go. Until one night, everything changed. 3 years passed. Gerald had not returned, and Claire had learned to live in the mansion, though fear never truly left her. Then, one cold evening, a car pulled up outside. Claire, standing by the window, saw him step out. Gerald was finally home. The moment he walked into the house, the air changed. The lights flickered. The walls felt colder. And for the first time in years, Claire saw something that sent chills down her spine. A shadow, standing right behind him. It was there for only a second before it disappeared. Gerald did not greet her. Instead, he looked around, as if searching for something. Before she could speak, the chandelier above them shattered, sending glass crashing to the floor. Gerald's face darkened. They were not alone. That night, Claire could not sleep. She tossed and turned, feeling something watching her from the darkness. Then, in the stillness of the night, she heard breathing. Not her own, not Gerald's. She turned her head and froze. At the foot of the bed stood a woman, dressed in a wedding gown, her veil torn, her skin grey and lifeless. She was not human. Claire could not move, could not speak. The woman slowly lifted her veil, revealing a rotting face with eyes black as the night sky. Then she spoke, in a voice colder than the wind. Why are you in my husband's bed?" Claire's body went numb. The woman reached out, her fingers long and bony, stretching towards Claire's throat. Just as her hand was about to touch Claire's skin, Gerald stirred beside her. In that instant, the woman disappeared, but Claire knew. She was still there, watching, waiting. By morning, Claire demanded answers. Gerald looked at her with dark, tired eyes, and then he spoke words that shook her to the core. "You are not my first wife." Her heart pounded. "Then where is she?" she asked. Gerald's voice was barely a whisper. "She never left." Claire's blood turned to ice. The house was haunted, but worse, the spirit haunting it was Gerald's first wife, and she was not ready to leave. Claire stared at Gerald, her heartbeat loud in her ears. His words repeated in her mind. She never left. She had spent 3 years alone in this house, thinking the footsteps, whispers, and shadows were just tricks of the mind. Now, she knew the truth. Gerald's first wife was dead, but she was still in the house. Claire wanted to leave. Her body screamed for her to pack her things and run far away. But something held her back, a force stronger than fear. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was foolishness. Or maybe deep down she already knew. This spirit was not done with her yet. Gerald was not a man who talked much, but that night he told Claire the truth. His first wife, Adanna, was chosen for him, just like Claire. He did not love her, but the marriage was arranged by his family. At first, things were normal. Adanna tried to make the marriage work, tried to get Gerald to love her, but he was cold, distant, much like he was with Claire. Then, one night, something happened. Adanna went missing. The family searched for her everywhere. They called the police, asked around, even hired private investigators. But Adanna was never found. After a few weeks, they declared her dead. But Gerald knew the truth. She never left the house. Her body was never found because it was still there, watching, waiting, haunting. Gerald's voice was heavy when he spoke. "The night you saw her was not the first time." Claire shivered. She had married into a cursed home. That night, Claire could not sleep. Gerald had gone to his study, leaving her alone in the bedroom. The air was thick, heavy, as if something unseen was pressing against her chest. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling when she heard it, the scratching. It was faint at first, like a rat dragging its claws against wood, but it grew louder. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Claire turned her head towards the wardrobe. The noise was coming from inside. She sat up slowly, fear crawling through her veins. The wardrobe doors stood shut, but the scratching continued. Then, the doors burst open. Claire gasped as a shadowy figure crawled out. It had long arms, twisted fingers, and a veil that dragged on the floor. It was Adanna. Claire could not move. The ghostly woman lifted her head, revealing a face half-eaten by decay, black holes where eyes should have been. Adanna lunged forward, her bony hands reaching for Claire's throat. Just as the spirit's fingers touched her skin, Claire screamed. The lights flickered violently, and the room went ice cold. Then, a deep, angry voice filled the air. "Leave my home!" In an instant, the spirit disappeared. Claire sat frozen, gasping for breath. The voice, it was not Gerald's. It was something else. Something older, darker, and more dangerous. The next morning, Claire did not speak. She went about her chores in silence, but her mind was racing. She had survived Adanna's attack, but the voice, who had spoken? That night, she got her answer. Claire was in the kitchen when she heard a whisper. "You should not be here." She spun around, but there was no one there. The whisper came again. "She will not let you live." Claire's hands trembled. "Who are you?" she whispered back. Silence. Then, as she turned to leave, the kitchen door slammed shut. The walls began to shake. The plates on the shelves crashed to the floor. And then, a shadow formed in the doorway. It was not Adanna. It was something else. A dark figure, tall and faceless, stood before her. Claire did not scream. She could not. The figure leaned forward, and in a deep, thunderous voice, it spoke. "This house belongs to the dead." Then, just as suddenly as it came, it disappeared. Claire fell to her knees. She had thought Adanna was the only spirit haunting the house. She was wrong. There was something else living in the walls, something far worse. Claire knew she could not stay in the house another night without answers. She went to the village to see Mama F, the old woman who knew all the ancient things, the one people whispered about but never spoke to directly. Mama Ife listened to Claire's story without speaking. Then, after a long silence, she sighed. "You have entered a home that was never meant for the living," she said. Claire felt her heart sink. "What does that mean?" Mama Ife took a handful of cowrie shells and tossed them onto the ground. She studied them for a moment before looking up. "The woman you saw," she said. "She's not resting. Something binds her spirit to that house. Until it is broken, she will not leave." Claire swallowed hard. "How do I break it?" Mama Ife's face darkened. "That spirit does not want to be free. To break the curse, you must call her by name. You must confront her. But be warned, once the ritual begins, there is no turning back." Claire nodded, determination mixing with fear. If she did not end this, Adanna would kill her. She was sure of it. That night, Claire prepared herself. She followed Mama Ife's instructions, lighting 3 red candles in the center of the sitting room and drawing a circle around them with white chalk. At exactly midnight, she called out the name, "Adanna!" The air grew thick. The candles flickered violently. Claire took a deep breath and spoke again. "Adanna, show yourself." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, a long, chilling wail filled the room. The temperature dropped instantly. The walls shook. And then, she appeared. Adanna crawled out of the darkness, her rotting body twisting as she moved. Claire's hands trembled, but she did not move. "Why are you still here?" she asked, her voice shaking. Adanna's hollow eyes locked onto her. Then, in a voice that sounded like it came from the grave, she answered, "He killed me," Claire gasped. "Who?" The ghost's lips twisted into something like a smile. "Your husband!" Claire's blood ran cold. Gerald had lied. Adanna had not disappeared. He had murdered her. And now she wanted revenge. Claire could not believe what she had just heard. "He killed me." Adanna's voice still echoed in her ears, sending a chill down her spine. Gerald had murdered his first wife. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to say the ghost was lying. But deep down, something in her heart whispered that it was the truth. She thought back to the way Gerald avoided speaking about Adanna, how he never looked comfortable when the topic came up, how he was always in a hurry to change the subject. Was this the reason? Had he married her too, only to do the same thing to her? Claire took a slow, shaky breath. If Gerald was truly a murderer, then she was in more danger than she ever imagined. She needed to find out the truth. But how? And more importantly, was it already too late? That night, Claire did not sleep. She sat awake, staring at the bedroom door, half expecting it to creak open on its own. But nothing happened. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Just as she was about to close her eyes, she heard the sound of soft footsteps. They were coming from the hallway. Slow, careful. Her body froze. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw the wardrobe door begin to open on its own. Claire's breath hitched. She wanted to run, but fear held her still. Then, a shadow crawled out, not walked, not stepped, crawled. She squeezed her eyes shut, hoping it was just a trick of the mind. But when she opened them again, the shadow was closer. A low, whispering voice filled the air. "He buried me under the house!" Claire gasped. Before she could react, a cold hand grabbed her wrist. By morning, Claire was trembling. The ghost had told her everything. Gerald had killed Adanna in this house and buried her under the floor. If she had any doubts before, they were gone now. She had to find the body, and she had to do it before Gerald found out what she knew. That night, she waited until Gerald went to his study, then quietly made her way to the backyard. She carried a small shovel, her hands shaking as she approached the spot Adanna had whispered about. The ground looked normal, but when she pressed her foot against it, the soil felt softer than the rest. She began to dig. Every handful of soil she removed made her heart pound faster. Then, her shovel hit something hard. Claire dropped to her knees and brushed the dirt away with her hands. What she saw almost made her faint. A skull, half buried, still covered in tattered cloth. The mouth twisted open in a silent scream. Claire's stomach twisted. Adanna's body had been here all along, and Gerald had lied about everything. Claire didn't know how long she knelt there, staring at the skull of the woman whose place she had taken. A sudden crackling of branches made her freeze. She turned around. Gerald was standing behind her. His face was dark, his eyes burning with something dangerous. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She knew then, without a doubt, he had planned to do the same thing to her. Gerald took a step forward. Claire scrambled back. I know what you did, she whispered, her voice barely coming out. He didn't blink. His voice was calm, too calm. You shouldn't have dug. Her heart pounded. She could see it in his eyes. He wasn't going to let her leave alive. Then the wind howled. The ground beneath them shook violently, and before Claire could react, the earth split open. A rotting skeletal hand shot out from the dirt. Claire screamed. Gerald stumbled backward, and then Adanna rose from the grave. The air turned ice cold. Adanna's figure rose slowly, her tattered wedding gown hanging off her decayed bones. Gerald's face twisted in horror. Claire could not move. Then Adanna opened her mouth, but the voice that came out was not just hers. It was deep, filled with rage and pain. You took my life. Now I will take yours. Gerald tried to run, but Adanna moved too fast. Her skeletal fingers wrapped around his throat. He gasped, choked, his legs kicking as he fought against the strength of the vengeful spirit. The wind screamed through the trees. The house shook. Adanna's eyes burned with fury as she lifted Gerald into the air. Claire watched in horror. The spirit tightened her grip. Gerald's face turned blue. Then, his body went limp. With a final earth-shaking scream, Adanna dragged him into the open grave. The ground closed over them instantly. Just like that, Gerald Shehu was gone. Silence. The wind stopped. The house was still. For the first time in years, Claire felt the heaviness lift. The spirit of Adanna was gone. The curse had ended. Tears filled Claire's eyes. She had been so close to death, yet she had survived. The house no longer felt cold. The whispers had vanished. And when she walked inside, she found something she never thought she would. Peace. The next morning, Claire packed her things. She had no reason to stay. The house, the money, the wealth, none of it mattered anymore. She buried Adanna properly, placing fresh white cloth over her bones, praying over the disturbed earth. She owed the dead bride that much. Before she left, she turned one last time towards the house. It stood there, quiet, almost as if it, too, was grateful to be free. Claire took a deep breath, stepped outside the gates, and never looked back. She had escaped. She had survived. And for the first time in a long time, she was free.